Hi, everybody. Hi. Nice to be back. I was here about a year ago, I think, or in July or August, I think I was here. So they invited me back. Woo! I'm going to be here today and tomorrow. Are we good, Alan? Okay. So I am going to talk about abductions, alien abductions, which is a strange topic for a lot of people, and it's a scary topic. And we're taught to joke and laugh at it, to ridicule it. Because if you think about it, contact with beings from a different dimension is kind of an intriguing subject if you can get past the whole programming that's gone on. We've been taught through the media to laugh at people who claim to have these kinds of encounters. So it's the reason that I come out. You can't hear me? A little. Okay. I'll let him do it back there. So we've been taught to laugh and ridicule because there are those who have a vested interest in making sure that we do not make contact with our family, our cosmic family. So that is why I talk. Do you want to spend some time getting this fixed? Do you need me to? Are you okay? That thing there? I'm going to lean on this thing. I got to be up here for 90 minutes. Oh, I can't stand in front of that, can I? I got that PowerPoint thing. I forgot about that. Right here? Okay. So where was I? Okay, that's why I talk. That's why I go around the country. It isn't because I have a need to be in the public eye. I'm just the opposite. I'm probably the last person that you would expect to claim having contact with extraterrestrials or any kind of beings from a different world. I'm a Capricorn through and through, very pragmatic and very feet on the ground. So I'm going to share with you today my story. I'm going to put it in a very short, brief summary of what I've gone through and how I arrived at the vision or the explanation that I have for what's happening to me and what I believe is the whole reason behind the abduction phenomenon. So we're going to start with the topic of, see if I did this right. I must be doing it wrong. There we go. Alien abductee. There's the definition of it. We are people who believe that we have been taken seemingly against our will by beings from another world, another dimension, and we are subjected to physical and psychological procedures. It feels a lot like we are victims, and that's how you feel. You feel like this is being done to you. It's not something you're in agreement to. You don't understand how it's possible that you could ever agree to having these creatures come into your room in the middle of the night or stop your car or do whatever it is that you're doing in your backyard, and they literally haul you off to the ship. As fantastic as that sounds, I can assure you that it's true. That is what happens. And it was a tough thing for me to come to terms with. I struggled with it a lot. So I'm going to tell you how this all started for me, because I was living a pretty ordinary life. I live in Wisconsin. I have a real estate company. I had 2 beautiful children and a husband, and my life was flowing along quite nicely. It was 1987. Let's see if I can get this to work. Oh, no, going the wrong way. 1987, my community had what's called a UFO flap. It is an area where there's activity, lots of sightings and documented sightings of UFO craft in the skies, some of them on the ground. And my community and the 3 villages around me, because I live in a rural area, we were a hotbed of activity during this time in 1987. We were like the number 1 place for UFOs on the planet. And it went on for several weeks, which is unusual. It actually went on for 18 months, but I know they documented some really phenomenal sightings during about a 3-week period of time. If you took the area where these sightings were reported, it was a triangular shape between these communities, and my house was right in the middle of it. And it was during this time that that I came to know what had happened to me. So I'm going to tell you how this came about. In 1968, when I was 17 years old, I was going to my girlfriend's house. 1968. Back then we didn't have cell phones or any kind of means of texting or anything else, so we made plans back then. So we made a plan that I was going to be to her house by 10 a.m. If I wasn't there by 10 a.m., then I wasn't going to be showing up at all. We were going to go shopping. Her and her sister and myself, we were going to go shopping, and I didn't know if I could get off work. I wasn't going to know till the last minute. So I told her, if I can make it, I'll be there. If I don't make it, go without me. So I knew how long it took me to get to her house, 15 minutes. And I was driving along this country road in my little VW Bug, and my car just died. The engine just went dead. And the car rolled to a stop, and there was a man standing in my lane of traffic, and he had his hand up. And there were 3 other men behind him. They were all dressed alike in these coveralls, matching coveralls. That's all I remembered until I walked into my girlfriend's house 2 hours late, the clock straight up noon. And she's yelling at me, "Where have you been? You were supposed to be here at 10 o'clock. You're just lucky the cows got out and we couldn't get them back in. Otherwise, we would have left without you." And I said, "I'm not late. I'm here." And she said, "And it's noon." But she said, "It's noon." And I said, "I can see that, but your clocks are wrong." And I argued with her because I could not believe what I was seeing. That clock said straight up noon. I had no recollection of the 2 hours of missing time. So in 1987, when we're having this UFO flap, what happens to me? I start becoming obsessed with what happened to me in 68. All of a sudden, out of thin air, I start to wonder, whatever happened that day, way back then, those 2 hours of missing time? I wonder what happened to me, and I become obsessed about it. And I don't know which bothered me more. The fact that I had rolled to a stop and lost 2 hours of time with 4 men standing right there in the road by my car at 17 years of age, or that I had lived almost 20 years and never once even looked at that. I'd never once thought, I never talked about it, I never questioned it. That was probably more disturbing to me than what might have happened to me during the 2 hours of missing time. So it was a strange thing. I was trying every night as I went to sleep. I was replaying the events of that day, and I could see myself going down the road. I could even hear the music on the radio. There's a Beach Boys song playing. When my car suddenly dies, the car dies, but the radio keeps playing. So I have to turn the radio off. I try popping the clutch. I try all kinds of things to get the car going again, and I can't get it going. And then I see those guys. I saw them, and then I'm rolling to a stop right at his feet. And he leans on the hood of the car, and he looks through the windshield at me, and he says something to me. So I know all this. So as I go to sleep at night, every night for weeks, I would play that through, thinking that in my sleep I would bring that to the surface, his face. Because I knew that his face was the key to it. If I could just see him, that would tell me what had happened to me that day. But I couldn't get there, and it just never came to the surface. So I decided I'm going to get regressed. I'm going to get hypnotized. And again, this is 1987, and you can't just go on Google and find out where a hypnotist is. I looked on the yellow pages, and that was pretty dismal. So I was trying to figure out how to find a hypnotist when my girlfriend called me, Vicki. Now, this is the same girlfriend. This is how my life works. This is the very same girlfriend whose house I was going to way back in 1968. We're still friends, still to this day. She calls me and she says, "Come with me to the high school tonight. The investigators are going to give a briefing on what's happening with this whole UFO thing." And I said, "No, I'm not interested." I had no interest in UFOs. If anyone had asked me, I would have said, I'm sure that there's life out there, and I'm sure there's probably some that fly by the planet, and there's UFOs, but I never really thought beyond that. I just had no interest in it, less than normal, actually. And so I said, no, I'm not going to go, wasting my time. And she said, well, I would have thought that you, of all people, would want to go to that. And I said, why do you say that? And she said, well, because you always talked about UFOs when we were teenagers, and you always talked about how you saw them, and you saw little men. And she said, what about that time when you were coming to my house and you had the 2 hours of missing time? She said, in this newspaper article, it says that the investigators are looking for anyone who has seen a UFO and then experienced missing time. And I said, why? And she said, because they think that the ETs come out and take the person and take them on board the ship. And they want to hypnotize them and find out what happens to them. And I laughed. I laughed my ass off. And I said, are you kidding me? I said, that's the dumbest thing I ever heard of. I said, Vicki, that does not happen. How silly are you to believe that? I said, that doesn't happen. And she said, well, and she laughed nervously, and she said, well, it said so in the paper. And I said, I don't care. It's not true. That does not happen. But she had said, these people want to hypnotize people. And I thought, you know what? These people probably know a really good hypnotist. They can probably give me a name of somebody that I can go to that's probably pretty good. So I said, you know what? I'll go with you, and I'll see if I can get one of those guys to tell me the name of a good hypnotist. So I went with her that night, and I walked into that gymnasium with all those other people, and I looked around, and I thought, fools, you fools, you're all here believing in something like ETs and UFOs, and, you know, I was pretty much a smart mouth, you know, but they proceeded to put on a pretty good talk, and I got really anxious. And in my book, I talk about it. I'm not going to go into it here. We'll never get through this, but it was quite an experience because I started having explosions in my head of memories, and I didn't know what that was about. It was pretty amazing. I had had experiences that week, and they were buried, you know. But when I saw some of the stuff that they put on the flip chart, the pictures of the ships and stuff, it just blew me away. I could hardly walk. So during the break, oops, can't hardly see him. There's good old Don Schmidt. He's since gone on to be a best-selling author. He's an expert on Area 51 in Roswell. Lucky as I was, he was my investigator. And he's a great guy. He's very thorough, very compassionate, good guy. He was the co-director of the Center for UFO Studies at the time that this flap was happening. So he came up to do the investigation, and he's the one I connected with and asked for the name of a hypnotist, and he wouldn't give it to me. When he found out what it was I was wanting to look into, he had an inkling of what might have happened to me that day. It took him about 3 months or more to convince me to allow the Center for UFO Studies to be involved in my regression. I did not want them involved because, first of all, I was embarrassed because I knew that there was no such thing as a UFO abduction or an alien abduction. And I thought, for as intelligent as Don Schmidt seemed to be, I thought he had a screw loose somewhere that he believed in that, and that he must be really bored with his life that he had to be delving into such fantasies. So I didn't want to waste anybody's time, but Don convinced me eventually to allow them to be involved in my hypnosis. I'm glad that I did. He told me that they do not go looking for this, and besides, when you're under hypnosis, if it's done properly, you cannot be led. You cannot do anything except experience the truth of what happened to you. So we eventually did do the regression, and Stanley Mitchell, who is just a phenomenal hypnotist, he developed battlefield hypnosis. And he's just an amazing guy. Yeah, his credentials were top shelf. Took them a long time to get me under. And they took me through the events of that day. And it's an interesting thing because what that hypnosis taught me was that eventually I learned that time doesn't exist. Time, space do not exist. They're just illusions of this third and fourth dimensional world. Being regressed the way that I was regressed that day took me back to that day totally. And I experienced timelessness because I was there. I was not remembering it. He was not leading me. He didn't have to. I was living it. I was there. So the greater part of my awareness was on that road in that car driving along. And when things happened, I experienced it as real. A small part of me was aware that I was sitting in Stanley Mitchell's office down in Chicago. But almost very little of my attention was there. It was mostly back when I was 17 years old. It was really interesting. We broke through the barrier when my car rolled to a stop. And I eventually was able to see the face of the man who was leaning on the hood of my car. And I heard him say, "We have been waiting for you, Sherry." And I thought, how does this person know my name? And how does he know to be waiting here for me when I didn't even know until 15 minutes ago that I was going to be coming here? And it scared me. And then I started to focus. It took so long because your mind plays tricks on you. You don't see for a while. You don't see any. It's kind of a blur. It doesn't register because he wasn't human. And my mind wouldn't accept that. My mind would not accept the fact that I was seeing someone who was not human. And, I don't like that picture. It looks scary, but that's what my guy looks like. It's hard to find any friendly pictures of ETs online, and I'm not an artist, so I can't really draw them. But that's what my guy looks like. His name is Da, D-A, Da. So he's leaning on the hood of the car, and he's saying to me, "We've been waiting for you." And when he says that, I put my arms on the steering wheel. Well, I locked the doors, put my arms on the steering wheel, and I put my head down, and I braced myself. And I'm shaking like a leaf, just shaking. I'm so afraid. And he says to me, "Why do you do this to yourself? Why do you do this? You always do this, Sherry. Look at me. You know if you look at me, it'll be fine." And I'm just keeping my eyes shut. Pretty soon I feel something rub up against my forearm, and I open my eyes to see a tannish gray, I would call it a claw. It's like a hand, but it's more like a claw. It's 4 fingers, very long, with dry, scaly skin, moving across me and wrapping its fingers around this wrist. And another one comes in and wraps around this wrist. And they pull me out of the car. So now, as soon as they do that, I stop shaking, and I'm not afraid anymore. Now I'm standing by the side of the road, and I'm looking at this guy, and I'm going, pretty interesting dude. He's got this skinny neck, and I'm trying to think, how does he hold up that humongous head with that little skinny neck? And then I'm looking at his ears, which are not really there. He's got a cap on, but you can see it. Looking at his nose, which is more of a crevice. His mouth, which when he talks, I realize it doesn't move. But I hear his voice, which is very familiar to me. I'm studying him. He's got an insignia on his left breast. And I don't even remember what he said to me. I was just so busy studying him. And there's one of two other guys. There's 4 of them all together. This guy, he's the lead guy. He's in charge, you can tell. He seems bigger. I don't know if he is physically bigger or if his energy I just knew he was the leader. The other guys, one on each side of me holding me, and then another guy still over in the ditch. They had wands, and they were pointing the wands at the ground. So all of a sudden, this Mr. Leader, he says, "Okay, Sherry, you know the drill. there's work to be done. And he turns, and he's gone. And I turn to see where he's going, and these guys start walking me across in front of the car to the other side of the road, and I see over in the field a beautiful little flying saucer, a ship. And it's beautiful silver, shiny as can be, and I love the way it looks sitting there. As soon as I see it, I just feel a strong attachment. I want to go toward it, but then there's a part of me that doesn't really want to go there because I know what's going to happen. But I don't have any choice. These guys are on each side of me, and they got like death grips on me. They always leave these fingerprints when they do that because they just like vices on you. So they walk with me very quickly. I can't keep up with them, so I finally just give up and let them drag me. Because what I realize now, it's not three-dimensional. We're in a dimension that's between their dimension and mine, and so time isn't the same. So we're like going to that ship. And as we get closer to the ship, I see Da's already over there. I don't know at this point. I recognize him, but I'm not sure who he is. And there's a woman there, and I'm like, oh, a human. There's another human there. She's wearing a shift. And I think, this is good. I'm not alone. But then as I get closer, I'm like, wait a minute. I think I know that woman. And she's got thin hair and big almond eyes, high cheekbones. And she looks familiar to me. And her name is Aurora. I know her now. But at the time, I was like, oh, she looked familiar. She's always there when they come for me. And I have to go up this ramp, really steep ramp. They help me up this ramp. And she takes me into the ship, which is really cold, first of all. So cold that you start to shiver as soon as you walk in there. And the second thing you notice is that it looked like it was like a 20 to 30-foot circumference. But what it is, when you get inside, it seems like 2 or 3 times larger than that. It seems like I would have to squat down to be inside.